The morning my husband tried to erase 12 years of my life, he wore the navy suit I had bought him for our 10th anniversary. He stood outside courtroom 4 with one hand in his pocket and his new girlfriend beside him. Vanessa had once been the communications director at his company. Now she wore my mother-in-law's pearls and looked at me as if I were an unwanted employee waiting to be dismissed. Caleb leaned close enough for me to smell the expensive cedar cologne he had started wearing after he became successful. "By lunch," he whispered, "you'll understand that service ribbons don't pay for ownership." Vanessa smiled. She should be grateful you supported her little government job for so long. I didn't answer. I reached into my leather case, removed a sealed blue envelope bearing a Department of Defense legal seal, and handed it to my attorney, Priya Desai. "Not yet," I said. "Give it to the judge after he testifies." Caleb saw the envelope and laughed. 5 years earlier, that laugh would have made me defend myself. That morning, it only confirmed that he still had no idea who he had married. My name is Elena Brooks. I was 41 when my marriage ended in a county courthouse outside Dayton, Ohio. If you've ever been treated like your quiet work didn't count because nobody could see it, tell me where you're watching from. Subscribe if you know what it feels like to be dismissed by people who benefited from your strength. And comment steady if you've ever had to stay calm while someone confidently lied about you. Caleb and I met when we were 26. I was a first lieutenant in the Air Force, assigned to logistics readiness at Wright-Patterson. He was an aircraft mechanic with a talent for seeing possibilities inside broken things. He could hold a damaged valve in his hand and explain exactly why it had failed. I admired that about him. He had an idea for a company that would refurbish specialized ground support equipment for civilian airports. Banks rejected him twice. Investors liked his plans, but not his lack of capital. I had $43,000 saved from a deployment, and another $17,000 my mother had left me when she died. I used almost all of it. The first check I wrote to Caleb's company was for $38,500. The second covered the deposit on a cold warehouse near the interstate. I co-signed the equipment lease, paid our apartment rent, and used my military health coverage so he could go 18 months without taking a salary. The warehouse smelled like hydraulic fluid and wet concrete. On winter evenings, I would leave base, bring him dinner, and help enter invoices while he repaired equipment beneath fluorescent lights. He used to kiss the top of my head and say, "When this works, no one will ever forget what you did." I believed him. My mother had given me a small brass compass before my first deployment. The back was engraved with 4 words, "Know where you stand." I kept it in my uniform pocket overseas, and in my desk drawer after I returned. During those early company years, I sometimes held it while waiting for overdue invoices to clear, reminding myself that temporary hardship was not the same as failure. Caleb's company, Prevail Aeronautical Systems, finally found its market. A regional airport contract led to 3 more. He hired technicians, rented a larger facility, and began appearing in local business magazines. At first, success softened him, then it sharpened every selfish part of him. He started referring to the company as the thing he had built from nothing. He removed my name from the company history page because investors preferred a single founder narrative. When I asked why, he said my military position created unnecessary questions. My career was changing too, but in ways I couldn't explain at dinner parties. After active duty, I joined the Air Force Reserve and accepted a civilian position inside a defense continuity office. My family heard the words civilian and office and decided I processed forms. In reality, my team protected the systems that moved fuel, medical supplies, and aircraft parts across several installations. We planned for cyber attacks, infrastructure failures, and deliberate disruption. When digital systems became unreliable, we built verified manual routes so commanders could keep operating. The work came with restricted briefings and long nights inside windowless rooms. I couldn't discuss the names of systems or the details of incidents. Silence was part of the job. Caleb turned that silence into a story that served him. At company dinners, he introduced me as someone who helped the government stay organized. His mother, Diane, told relatives I had chosen a safe desk career because I lacked his ambition. Vanessa once asked whether my security clearance was just a fancy password. I stopped correcting them. That was my mistake. Not because they deserved classified explanations, but because I kept confusing dignity with endurance. I endured being left out of company photographs even though my savings had kept the doors open. I endured Caleb using my military contacts as social proof while insisting I had contributed nothing. I endured Diane saying her son had carried the marriage financially, even in years when my salary covered our mortgage, health insurance, groceries, and his company's legal fees. The final 2 years were the worst. Caleb traveled constantly. Vanessa attended every conference. His phone remained face down at dinner. When I asked direct questions, he answered with irritation rather than truth. One night, I came home early from a reserve exercise and found Vanessa's suitcase in our guest room. Caleb didn't apologize. He said the marriage had been over for years and accused me of choosing duty over him. 3 days later, his attorney sent a settlement proposal. I would keep my car, my retirement accounts, and $30,000. Caleb would keep the house, the investment properties, and the company, which his filing described as the husband's separate entrepreneurial achievement. The company had recently been valued at $32 million. I read that sentence twice. Not because I wanted half of everything, I wanted the truth recorded somewhere that he couldn't edit. Priya Desai was the first attorney who listened without interrupting. Her office was small, with old carpet and a radiator that clicked every few minutes. I brought her tax returns, bank statements, deployment records, loan documents, and the original company formation binder. She opened the binder and paused. "Elena, why is your signature on the founder contribution schedule?" "Because I was the founder who contributed the money." "Do you have a stock certificate?" "I was told it had been cancelled during restructuring." "Were you shown the cancellation?" "No." Priya looked at me for a long moment. People use confidence to hide missing documents. Let's find the documents. Discovery changed the shape of the case. Caleb's legal team produced thousands of pages but not the original capitalization ledger. They claimed it had been lost during an accounting software migration. Priya found bank transfers showing my funds entering the company. A retired bookkeeper remembered preparing a 24% ownership certificate in my name. Caleb denied it had ever been issued. Then we found something worse. For 3 years, Prevail Aeronautical Systems had marketed itself to defense contractors as having embedded senior continuity expertise. A compliance packet listed me as an unpaid strategic advisor. My digital signature appeared on certifications I had never seen. Caleb had used my title and background when it helped him win access. In divorce court, he claimed I had never contributed. Priya reported the documents through the proper channel. The Department of Defense Inspector General opened a review because one certification involved a protected supply chain program. That was what the blue envelope contained. Not classified information, not revenge. A legally cleared notice confirming that the court could review verified records under seal, along with an authenticated copy of the original capitalization schedule recovered from a federal contracting archive. My name was there. 24%. The week before the hearing, I was called into work at 11:40 at night. A malicious software update had corrupted fuel status reporting at 6 installations during a winter exercise. The fuel itself was safe, but commanders could no longer trust the digital inventory numbers. If we guessed wrong, aircraft would be grounded. If we relied on false readings, crews could be placed at risk. The continuity room smelled of stale coffee and overheated electronics. Radio traffic crackled through ceiling speakers. On the main display, red warnings spread across a map. I led the verification cell. We cross-checked tanker receipts, manual gauge readings, dispatch logs, and aircraft schedules. I authorized a temporary isolation of the compromised network and shifted the installations to a paper and voice authentication process we had practiced but never used at that scale. At 2:16 in the morning, a colonel asked whether I was prepared to sign the continuity order. My hand rested on the cold metal clip of the document board. "If I sign this," I said, "every fuel release goes through our verification chain. That will slow operations. Less than poisoned data will." I signed. For the next 4 hours, my team kept training flights and 2 medical movements operating without relying on the corrupted system. The attack failed because we refused to let uncertainty become panic. At 3:08, while I was confirming a tanker movement, my personal phone lit up with a message from Caleb. "Accept the settlement before court. You never built anything, and I'm done paying for your pride." I looked at the message, locked the screen, and returned to the map. In one room, commanders trusted my signature to keep aircraft moving. In another part of my life, my husband claimed my signature had never mattered. By sunrise, the installations were stable. Major General Ruth Halden, the officer overseeing the exercise, came into the continuity room with snow melting on the shoulders of her coat. She placed a dark steel challenge coin beside my keyboard. "You kept 6 bases from making decisions on bad information," she said. "My team did." She nodded. "That answer is why they follow you." I slipped the coin into my pocket beside my mother's brass compass. The divorce hearing began 2 days later. Caleb's attorney spoke first. He described his client as a self-made entrepreneur and me as a spouse with an honorable but unrelated public service career. Caleb testified that he had created the company through personal labor and business instinct. Priya asked who paid the warehouse deposit. "I don't recall." "Who covered your living expenses while the company produced no salary?" "We shared expenses." "Did Elena Brooks provide startup capital?" "She gave me a personal loan that was repaid." It was the first time I had heard that version. Priya placed a bank record before him. "Where is the repayment?" Caleb glanced at his attorney. "It may have been handled informally." Priya asked about the original ownership schedule. He said it had been a draft. She asked why federal contracting records identified me as a founder and strategic advisor. His expression tightened. That was marketing language. "Did Mrs. Brooks approve it?" "I don't remember." Priya looked at me. I gave one small nod. She carried the sealed blue envelope to the clerk. The judge examined the seal, read the cover notice, and requested a brief recess while both legal teams reviewed the material under protective conditions. When court resumed, Caleb no longer leaned back in his chair. The judge held the authenticated capitalization schedule in one hand. "Mr. Vale," he said, "you testified that no ownership interest was issued to your wife." "That's my understanding. This document bears your signature, your former accountant's signature, and a federal archive authentication. It grants Mrs. Brooks 24% founder equity." Caleb's attorney stood. "Your Honor, we need time to assess." "You will have it." The judge lifted the second document. "We will also examine why Mrs. Brooks's professional credentials and digital signature appeared in federal compliance submissions she states she never authorized." The courtroom became so quiet I heard the air vent above us rattle. Vanessa lowered her eyes. Diane stared at Caleb. The judge looked over his glasses and said, "Mr. Vale, you have a larger problem than divorce." That was the sentence that broke his confidence. But it wasn't the moment that changed the room. That came 10 minutes later, when the court called Major General Ruth Halden as a limited verification witness. Caleb turned around so quickly his chair scraped the floor. General Halden wore service dress. She raised her hand, took the oath, and confirmed that I had never been authorized to advise Vale Aeronautical Systems. She explained that my actual work was separated from the company by strict ethics rules. Caleb's attorney asked whether my position was administrative. General Halden looked at him. "Colonel Brooks leads defense continuity operations affecting multiple Air Force installations." A murmur moved through the gallery. She continued. 48 hours ago, she directed the response that kept 6 bases operating during a coordinated systems compromise. She is not a clerk, and her name is not decorative. I didn't look at Caleb. I looked at the brass compass in my palm beneath the table. "Know where you stand." The judge ordered a full forensic accounting, froze any transfer of company shares, and referred the disputed certifications to federal investigators. The divorce asset decision would wait until the ownership records were complete. Outside the courtroom, Diane reached us first. "Caleb, tell me you didn't forge her name." "I didn't forge anything. Vanessa's department handled the packets." Vanessa went pale. "You approved every submission. You told me Elena had agreed. I told you we needed written consent." They turned on each other with the desperate speed of people who had been loyal only while the story benefited them. Caleb pulled me aside. "Elena, this can be fixed." I said nothing. "You know the company. You know what an investigation will do to our contracts." "Our contracts?" His face changed. "To the employees," he corrected. "Think about them." I did. That's why I reported it correctly. He lowered his voice. "Please, tell them it was a misunderstanding. For 12 years, I had protected his future before my own." That old reflex moved inside me once, then stopped. "You didn't misunderstand," I said. "You calculated." He stared at me. I walked past him without raising my voice. Comment enough if you've ever realized that helping someone avoid consequences would only teach them to hurt you again. The forensic review took 4 months. It confirmed my founder equity and documented more than $200,000 in direct and indirect financial contributions. It also found that Caleb had tried to move company assets into a new holding entity after filing for divorce. The judge rejected the transfer. My settlement reflected the verified ownership, the marital assets, and the value Caleb had tried to conceal. I received no dramatic fortune dropped from the sky. I received what the records showed had always been mine. The federal review produced separate consequences. Prevail Aeronautical Systems lost eligibility for 2 protected contracts and entered a compliance agreement. Vanessa resigned before the board could remove her. Caleb remained chief executive, but an independent monitor now reviewed every federal submission. Diane sent me a 6-page letter explaining that she had only believed what her son told her. I read the first page and put it away. Regret is not the same as repair. Caleb asked to meet after the settlement became final. We sat in the same warehouse office where I had once entered invoices beside him. The building was warmer now, with polished floors and framed magazine covers. He placed the Navy anniversary suit jacket over the back of a chair. I was wrong, he said. Yes. I started believing that because I was the visible one, I was the only one carrying anything. I waited. He rubbed his hands together. I don't know when I became this person. I do. He looked up. It happened each time the truth cost you something and you chose the easier story. His eyes filled, but I felt no victory. He asked whether I could forgive him. I don't hate you, I said, but forgiveness doesn't restore access. I left him sitting beneath the photograph that called him the sole founder. A year later, I used part of the settlement to create a grant program for military spouses and veterans who had quietly financed family businesses without legal protection. The first workshop had 14 people. The third had more than 80. I kept my defense work. I kept serving in the reserve. I kept the 2 coins on my desk, General Halden's dark steel coin and my mother's worn brass compass. On the first morning in my new home, I sat alone on the back steps with coffee, while rain darkened the wooden railing. No courtroom, no legal folders, no one asking me to make myself smaller so they could remain comfortable. I turned the compass over in my hand. Know where you stand. For years, I thought it meant holding my position no matter how much pressure came against me. I understand it differently now. Sometimes knowing where you stand means recognizing when the ground beneath a relationship has disappeared. Sometimes strength is not saving what you built. Sometimes it is refusing to be erased from it. The judge did not give me value. General Halden did not create my authority. The records did not make my sacrifice real. They only forced other people to see what had been true all along. Caleb told me I would leave court with nothing. He was wrong. I left with my name, my work, my future, and the quiet knowledge that I would never again hand someone the power to decide whether my life counted. And that was more than enough.